So they finally caught him. After years of running, after leading this absolutely impossible rebellion against the most powerful army in Europe, after winning battles literally nobody thought he could win, they finally caught William Wallace. And what the English king, Edward I, a guy literally known as the Hammer of the Scots, did next, well, it was designed to send a message. Welcome to this explainer on Scotland, the kingdom that never broke.
You see, they didn't just execute the guy. It was horrific. They hanged him, cut him down while he was still breathing, disemboweled him, and then beheaded him. And if that wasn't enough, they actually cut his body into 4 pieces, sent him off to the 4 corners of Scotland, and stuck his head right on London Bridge for everyone to gawk at. Edward I, he was smiling. He honestly thought Scotland was finished. He thought the rebellion was completely over and that his brutal message had been delivered loud and clear.
Which brings us to a huge question. How do you break a nation? Well, Edward figured the answer was to just completely destroy their biggest hero. But here is what he never ever understood about Scotland. You simply cannot break a people just by destroying their hero. In fact, sometimes you only end up making the legend that much bigger. I mean, just 6 weeks after Wallace's brutal execution, a brand new Scottish leader stepped up to the plate, Robert the Bruce. And guess what? 9 years later, Scotland actually won its freedom in what has to be one of the most stunning military upsets in all of European history.
Let's dive into part 1, the Ancient Defiance. Now, you gotta realize, Scotland's whole underdog status actually started way before William Wallace even existed. Way before the kilts and the famous castles, this land was ruled by the Picts. They were these incredibly mysterious, fiercely tattooed warriors. And when the mighty Roman Empire marched in to conquer Britain, they succeeded pretty much everywhere, except Scotland. Honestly, by 1222 AD, the Romans literally had to build Hadrian's Wall, and then a second wall later on, just to keep these Scottish tribes out. It's wild. And as we move forward on this timeline, the land faced the Angles down south, and then those terrifying Viking migrations kicking off around 800 AD. But here's the kicker. Even the Vikings couldn't conquer Scotland completely. Instead, all this constant outside pressure kind of forced a unified front. By 843 CE, King Kenneth MacAlpin managed to bring the kingdom together. So Scotland as a single nation, it was basically born out of sheer defiance?
Moving on to part 2, Wars of Independence.
So the whole catalyst for this era was a massive tragedy. Back in 1286, the Scottish king Alexander III died super suddenly in a storm, and that left Scotland totally vulnerable, without a clear ruler. Enter that highly ambitious English king we were talking about earlier, Edward I. He absolutely saw his opening. But Edward didn't just want a little influence over Scotland, he wanted to systematically erase it from existence. I'm serious, look at this list. He sieged their castles. He literally stole their most sacred coronation stone, the Stone of Destiny, and dragged it all the way back to London. He forced the Scottish king to step down and basically declared Scotland a conquered territory. He wanted to completely wipe this nation right off the map.
But like we saw with Robert the Bruce, the Scottish people just wouldn't quit. After Wallace's death, Bruce fought this incredibly desperate, grinding guerrilla war for 8 long years. We're talking hiding in caves, losing brutal battles, but just outright refusing to give in. And it all culminated on June 24th, 1314, at this boggy little field called Bannockburn. Just picture this, 7,000 Scottish soldiers staring down a massive, highly trained professional English army of over 20,000 men. It looked hopeless. Yet, fighting on their own soil for their absolute freedom, that tiny Scottish force totally routed the English. It was a massive, virtually impossible upset.
And you know what's amazing? That impossible military victory ended up translating into something even more profound for the world. In 1320, Scottish barons and nobles got together and sent a formal letter in Latin to the Pope. It's called the Declaration of Arbroath. This document formally declared Scotland's absolute status as an independent, sovereign nation, and today it stands as one of the most powerful historical documents about human freedom out there. In fact, and this is super cool, scholars heavily believe that this exact document directly influenced the American Declaration of Independence over 4 entire centuries later.
All right, that brings us to part 3, Union and Survival.
So the centuries right after Bannockburn brought some pretty dramatic shifts. You had the incredibly captivating but very tragic role of Mary Queen of Scots, and eventually in 1603, a Scottish king actually inherited the English throne. But the true systematic attempt to erase Scottish identity, that kicked off a bit later. Let's look at step 1 here.
the deeply controversial 1707 Acts of Union, which merged the Scottish and English parliaments. Now, a lot of Scots felt completely betrayed by this, and that outrage led to major rebellions, which ended terribly at Step 2, the incredibly bloody Battle of Culloden, where 1,500 Scots lost their lives in a single hour. Just brutal. But Step 3 is where it gets genuinely chilling. The English government started this aggressive suppression of the Highland way of life. They literally made it illegal to wear kilts. They banned the playing of bagpipes. They were actively trying to destroy Scottish culture from the very roots up.
Which leads us to a massive turning point in Part 4, inventing the modern world.
Talk about a comeback. Right from the ashes of all that cultural suppression came this unbelievable explosion of human genius. We call it the Scottish Enlightenment. Look at this table for a second. Adam Smith basically invented modern economics in 1776. So literally every stock market and trade deal we use today traces right back to him. Then you've got James Watt perfecting the steam engine, which effectively kicked off the Industrial Revolution and built our entire modern economy. Alexander Graham Bell, oh, he just invented the telephone, no big deal. And Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin in 1928, a single medical breakthrough that has saved upwards of 200 million human lives. Think about that for a second. The exact nation that was invaded and suppressed turned around and gave us the literal blueprints for modern civilization. And honestly, the list of everyday miracles born in Scotland just goes on and on. Television, the tarmac roads we drive our cars on every day, ATM machines where we grab our cash, the refrigerator, color photography, fingerprint detection, even the MRI scanner. I mean, wow, all of these incredibly crucial everyday essentials, they all came from Scotland, all from a nation of just around 5 million people. It's a completely disproportionate, oversized impact on global history. It's just wild.
Now let's bring it up to today with Part 5, a modern powerhouse.
All of that historical genius, well, it translates directly into serious economic dominance today. Check out this 2026 snapshot. Scotland's economy grew by 1.4% in 2025, actively outpacing the broader UK average. And here's a crazy stat. Edinburgh's economy has actually surpassed London when you look at GDP per head, making it one of the absolute most productive cities in all of Europe. On top of that, Scotland has been the #1 destination for foreign direct investment in the entire UK, outside of London, of course, for 10 solid years. They are an absolute driving force right now in global fintech and life sciences.
But then there is this mind-blowing number right here, greater than 100%. What does that mean? Well, Scotland has completely emerged as Britain's net zero powerhouse. On a lot of days throughout the year, Scotland already generates over 100% of its electricity needs entirely from renewable sources. That's huge. Up in Orkney, which is this northern island chain, you'll actually find the biggest tidal energy array in all of Europe. This whole green technology focus has turned into a massive £10.2 billion industry for them. It just proves that their legendary innovation is now laser focused on actually saving the planet.
Now, of course, with all this history, the big question of identity and self-governance, that never truly went away. Back in the 2014 independence referendum, the Scottish people voted by a 55% no to 45% yes margin to stay in the UK. But let me tell you, the debate over whether Scotland's future is ultimately better served inside or outside the United Kingdom is still very much alive. It completely defines Scottish politics today, and frankly, it remains one of the most closely watched political stories in all of Europe right now. So when we pull back and look at the whole picture, the contrast is just staggering, isn't it? We're talking about a population of just 5 million people, yet they possess this absolutely unbreakable, massive global legacy. I mean, from Pictish warriors holding off the mighty Roman Empire, to surviving those brutal attempts to erase their culture entirely after Culloden, to literally inventing the steam engine and the telephone, and now leading Europe in renewable energy. It just goes to show you simply cannot measure a nation by its size alone. Way back when, the English King Edward I sent pieces of William Wallace across the country because he thought it would break a people, but instead, he sparked a fire that quite literally forged the modern world. So can you ever truly suppress a culture that runs this incredibly deep? The entire history of this amazing nation screams a resounding no. 5 million people, one completely unbreakable spirit. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.